Okay, so I'm back today with another tutorial. This was a highly requested video from people asking for a mask pattern that did not have elastic on it, since I understand a lot of people are trying to help out hospitals right now. They're trying to make masks that have ties instead of the elastic. So this is what I came up with. This mask pattern was based on a disposable mask that I was able to get from the pharmacy. And obviously these contain elastic on the sides. So the mask pattern I designed was based off of this with ties in place of the elastic. So for this project, you're going to need sewing pins, some scissors, 3 pieces of fabric cut 10 inches long by 7 inches wide. Now for this mask, instead of just using the 2 layers of quilting cotton like I did for the other mask, I added a layer of flannel to the inside. If you don't have any flannel available, you can just use the cotton. That is fine as well. Then you're going to cut 4 strips that are 2 inches wide by 20 inches long, and you're going to need 4 of those. If you do have bias tape available or your local craft store has it, this also works well for ties. You can purchase the bias tape already done. You're going to open up the package, fold the bias tape in half, and stitch it. So there's less ironing and pressing and sewing. This is another really quick alternative if you have this available. So now we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you how to make the fabric ties first. Move all this stuff out of the way. For this, you're going to need an iron and an ironing surface. My iron is on and ready to go. You're going to start by taking one of your fabric strips. You're going to place it wrong side facing up. You're going to fold it in half lengthwise and press. You're going to go ahead and do that to all 4 pieces. Then you're going to open it up. You're going to take one of the long ends and you're going to fold it in towards that seam that you just made with your iron and press. Now go ahead and do that to the other side. Fold that down towards that center seam and press. Both towards the center seam. You're going to fold that in half again, so that way both of the sides are laying on top of each other. Give it a quick press. And there you go. You're going to take this to your sewing machine using a 1/4 inch seam. You're going to stitch down the open side. Now if you want to get really technical, you can sew down a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on the other side. And that's what I've done for these strips here. It just kind of reinforces it even more, but it's definitely not necessary. Doing it just down the one side is fine. So you're going to do that to all 4 pieces. Now for this tutorial, I've left the ends completely open and raw. You can trim off the threads when you're done. I just didn't feel it was really necessary to go ahead and finish these edges. You are able to if you'd want. You can fold them down a couple of times and stitch that. Okay, we have our mask ties pressed and ready. So now we're just going to go ahead and we're going to make a 1/4 inch seam down the side of the straps that are open. This is going to keep them together. Okay, so I've sewn a 1/4 inch seam down one side of the strap. Again, you could stop here and finish up your other 3 straps and be done. If you want to, you can sew a 1/4 inch seam down the other side as well, and this is just going to help reinforce the strap a little bit more. So now I have finished all 4 of my straps. Now we're going to go ahead and assemble our mask. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do, if you are going to use the flannel fabric in the center of your masks, is you're going to lay that down on your surface. Then you're going to go ahead and take the exterior or the front facing piece of your mask that you're going to see when you're wearing it, and you're going to lay that right side up on top of the flannel fabric. Then you're going to take your fabric ties that you just made, and you're going to pin it about a 1/4 inch or so down from the top. You're going to want to line up those raw edges so this long tail should be facing the inside. Grab another strap, again pin it about a 1/4 inch or so from the bottom of the mask. Flannel, our top piece of fabric, and our ties all pinned together. Now you're going to take the back side of your mask and you're going to put it right sides, so the pretty side facing down on top of all those other layers. Carefully just remove the pins for the straps and put them back in through all the layers of fabric. Make sure all your raw edges around the outside of the mask are lining up, and that your ties don't shift when you're pulling out your pins and repinning them. So I pinned in those 4 places. If you want to pin more around the exterior of the mask for when you're sewing it, you can do that. But now we're just going to go ahead and sew. Using that 1/4 inch seam, we're going to go all the way around the mask, except on one side in between the 2 ties, we're going to leave about a 2.5 or 3 inch gap. This is just going to allow us to turn the mask right sides out. Okay, so starting in the corner, we're going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around the mask, again leaving about a 2.5 or 3 inch gap, opening on one side in between the ties to turn the mask right sides out. Now when I sew over the areas where the strap is, I tend to backstitch just to reinforce that strap. Stop about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. You can just lift up your presser foot, leave the needle in the down position, and turn. Put your foot back down and start sewing. When you are sewing around, you're just going to want to make sure that no other pieces of the mask straps get in the line of sewing. You don't want those to be stitched down. This is the side in between the ties, so I stopped stitching here. I'm going to continue stitching right down here, leaving that gap. Okay, at this point we've just finished sewing all the way around our mask, leaving that opening on the side. Now if you want, you can take a pair of scissors and kind of clip the corners off a little bit, being careful not to cut through the stitching that you just did. This is just going to help it lay a little bit flatter. Okay, once that's done, we're going to turn our masks right sides out. Now you can go ahead and take any kind of tool that you may have. You can use scissors, just be really, really careful if you are going to use scissors to kind of use to ease out the corners a little bit. You can also use a pencil. If you do so and you have a harrow marker, you can use that as well. Go ahead and poke out all 4 of those corners so your mask is going to lay relatively flat. Trim any excess threads that you may find that made their way out. Okay, once you have that done, we're going to go ahead and give this a press so it's laying nice and flat before we get to the last step of folding it and stitching the vents in place. Okay, we're back over at our pressing surface, and we're going to go ahead and kind of push the seams out so they lay as flat as we can And you're gonna iron all the way around the mask. Now on the side of the mask where the opening is, you're just gonna wanna make sure those raw edges are folded towards the inside, so it lays nice and flat, and then press that. Now we're gonna head back to our machine and we're gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam around the exterior of the mask. Okay, now we have our mask all stitched. Put the right side of the mask facing up, take the ties, and we're gonna fold down so you have about an inch or so of the mask. Exposed at the top before the first vent. Go ahead and give it a press. The pressing isn't really necessary, it kind of just helps the mask hold in place while you're sewing. Then we're going to go ahead and take that top fold that we just made and we're going to fold it down again. You're going to want to leave about 1.5 inches or so between this bottom seamed edge and the second vent, and give it a press. You can pin it or clip it if you want. It's really up to you. Once you have ironed those, you can go ahead and give it a measure. Your mask should be about 3.5 or so inches wide after you've ironed your vents in place. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna sew that same 1/4 inch seam all the way down the side. For this part, I do like to try to stitch over the 1/4 inch seam that's already there, so the mask looks nice and clean when it's done. This is a lot of bulk, so just take your time. Back stitch at a few points during the seam all the way down. Just it's really reinforcing that tension that's going to be on these masks. Now go ahead and do the same thing to the other side and your mask will be finished. Trim up your threads and your mask is all finished. This is what the completed mask will look like. Here's the front and here is the back. And you really could wear it either way. It doesn't really matter, but that's how you sew a surgical face mask with ties. Let me know down in the comment section below if you guys have any questions or any other modifications, or if there's any other masks that you would like to see. I'm happy to make another pattern as well.